In Chicago, you know that all sports rock. The Bears, Hawks, Bulls, Cubs, and Sox. Pick your favorite, you can choose. As long as the Packers lose. For everything you need to know, it's Bill Swerski Sports Talk Chicago. Bill Swerski Sports Talk Chicago.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to another edition of Bill Swerski Sports Talk Chicago. This is your hosts, Alex and Sean. On this episode, we're going to be talking about the Bears wrapping up the preseason and getting ready for final roster cutdown. We're going to be talking Cubs and White Sox. But first, I'd like to thank our sponsor, the Rockford Ice Hogs. If you're not familiar with the Rockford Ice Hogs, they're the AHL minor league affiliate of the Chicago Blackhawks. What does that mean for you? You get to see the stars of tomorrow today at family-friendly, affordable prices. The season is not going on right now, but that shouldn't stop you from heading on over to icehogs.com. Get yourself a hat, shirt, jersey, sign up for season tickets, and more. Tell them Swerski Sports sent you. Alex, my friend, how are you holding up in this brutal heat wave?
Well, I'm doing all right. I enjoyed the good weather while it lasted last week, and now here comes the heat index. But you know what's nice is that the Bears don't have to play in this heat. At least they don't have to play a preseason game in this heat. So I would say, because a lot of the area, in the Midwest is going to be affected. So the Bears, I think, got their preseason in at a good time.
Right. And they get this few days off before the season starts next weekend, not this coming weekend, but the next weekend. And by that time, we should probably see the the little bit of a dip in temperature as September starts.
Yeah, you would hope at least. But hey, you know what? If it gets really, really hot like this for week one, it's another reason to say, hey, a dome would be nice, wouldn't it? Nice air conditioning.
As I've gotten older, when I was younger, it was like a badge of honor. Like, oh, I went to this game and it was 75 below zero, and we all got drunk and didn't wear shirts. And it's as I'm getting older, I'm like, you know what? I don't want to be uncomfortable. I don't want to have to bring the Sunday paper. If anybody, you youngsters listening, the Sunday paper was like 5 times as thick as any other day of the paper because there's all kinds of ads in there. But you'd bring the Sunday paper and you'd put it on the ground, so it gave you more insulation between the concrete on the floor or the ground and the rubber in your shoes. And it's just I don't want that anymore. I just want to be comfortable watching the game.
Yeah, no, I mean, I'm with you. What fun is it if you're sitting there in 7-degree weather with like a wind chill that brings it below zero? That sounds awful. It sounds absolutely awful. There's no fun in that. And hey, we've talked about bear weather a number of times on this show in the past, and what has bear weather done for us?
Nothing.
Yeah. I mean, sure, I get why there's like an aesthetic pleasure to watching football in the snow. I get it because you know what? Some of those snowy games are a lot of fun. Hell, look at last year when they beat the Falcons. That was the snowy game of the year. Bears won. It was a fun game. The NFC Championship game in 2006 when the Bears went to the Super Bowl. That was a snowy, mixy type of day. And yeah, it was very memorable. But hey, listen, if you have a great team on the field and you're in a dome, what the hell's the difference?
Yeah, and most of the time, as us Midwesterners know, is you know when it's snowing, it's probably not going to be as cold. Um, warms up a little bit, but so I don't mind the snow. It's just when you get like the those polar vortexes and you get that wind whipping off the lake, like it's just brutal to be because you're just sitting there. It's not like, all right, the players are out running and you know uh, they've got a sweat going and that's and then plus they've got the heat down there on the sidelines. Like they can do things. Like if you're a fan, you're just sitting there, especially like if you're like in the 300 section, like you are just getting that wind and it is brutal. It's brutal. And you're just sitting there and you're like, you don't want to move because like you really can't move much in those seats. But You don't really want to move because uh, you're basically kind of clenching everything in to preserve body heat. So I'm so ready for a dome. And at this point, I don't give a shit if it's in Arlington Heights or if it's on the lake. Just give me a dome.
Yeah,
Yeah. I want Bears season tickets, and I want to be able to comfortably watch the games.
I understand. I understand. You know, picture this too. We've talked about this before. My grandfather was at the 1963 championship game. Bears beat the Giants 14-10 at Wrigley. He got the footage of it. It's on YouTube. So if you've listened to this podcast, look me up, Alex Pat, you'll find in my list of videos, I posted that footage he took from 1963 from Wrigley Field in the temporary bleachers right near the north end zone. But the temperature that day was 4 degrees without the wind chill. There was wind chill on top of that. Now, they did try to heat the field before the game, but think about it. Back in 1963, you didn't have any sophisticated way like you do now because there are NFL stadiums out there that control the turf temperature from underneath. Like they have a facility or some sort of technology below the turf. And then obviously a lot of turfs out there, they're either fake or they're a hybrid of some kind with real and fake. But just picture 1963, you're playing on old Wrigley Field ground in that weather in 4 degree plus the wind chill, which I think was like -10, -15, whatever it was. You're basically playing in the numbing cold on concrete. Could you imagine?
Not fun. Not fun at
No.
all.
Especially not for Y.A. Tittle, the Giants, the future Hall of Fame quarterback, got picked off 5 times and was just beaten to a pulp by the
And his
Bears defense that day.
and his name was Y.A. Tittle.
Y.A. Tittle.
But yeah, so I'm just ready for a dome. It's I will say that like when those November games, like I'm okay with a little weather. Like honestly, like I'm okay with a little weather. It's just those end of the season, like the end of the season games, they're just so ridiculously brutal. And the early games, they run the risk of just being really hot and muggy. And it'd just be nice to I would forego those handful of games where they're just nice weather for consistency.
Yeah, some of the best, I think, NFL weather is October and early November because that's when it's not humid and hot, but it's not frigid cold for the most part. Like when you play games out there and it's like in the 50s, that's pretty
Yeah, I mean
nice
that's college
because,
football weather.
you put on some coats and some gloves and you're fine. And exactly,
Yeah, that's
exactly.
college football weather because they wrap it up, you know, in November. So you're just done. You're done before the weather takes that like sharp turn in most places. And sure, you'll get some cold weather at, Michigan or Wisconsin, but for the most part, like most of your games are just wrapped up by the time that weather is brutal.
Right.
Um, so, but they just play less games and they start earlier.
Yeah, week 0 is already here, we've already got an upset. You gotta love it.
Oh yeah, I was watching the Florida State fans taunting about how they were just gonna run roughshod, and they lost.
Womp womp.
Womp womp. So let's talk about these Bears. Uh, you know, this game against the Chiefs was all backups. Kansas City didn't play any of their starters. I don't think the Bears played any starters, but you know,
It was like Hall of Fame game 2.0.
kind of, yeah. Except, you see guys a little more in season ready, and
Yes, yes, you're
and
right.
and this is that last push for guys to make roster spots. Um, but what I can tell you is this team looks way more prepared than last year.
I agree.
Um, that hits principle has really taken hold, and everybody's just playing hard. They're running fast, they're playing hard, and I really appreciate that. And I don't think, you know, do the Bears guarantee win on week one? No, but do I feel like the they are going to be much more prepared than they were week one last year? Absolutely.
Yeah, and I mean there is a big point of emphasis on that because of how insanely ill prepared they were to start the season last year. I mean that stuck out like such a sore thumb. It wasn't even funny.
Yeah, I mean, and defensively, I think they're much more uh, prepared and in season form than they are on the offense. But that's to be expected because you have a brand new offensive coordinator and a rookie quarterback, and a rebuilt offensive line. So not surprising, but that defense is looking really solid.
It is, and again, you take it for what it's worth considering who was playing, but they made several big plays. There were a few interceptions, including one in the end zone, one for a pick six. And then there was the play on the batted array pass that was obviously very impressive. Now, obviously, again, it wasn't Pat Mahomes out there, but like you said, they were all over it. They were reading the defense, trying to read the defense, and the defense was countering very, very well. Like you said, they play hard. That's been a common theme of this preseason is that they played hard until the end. And it's worth what it's worth considering you got a lot of backups and guys trying to make the roster playing and these games don't have any meaning in the standings, but it at least maybe tells me that this regime, this coaching staff, this whole hits principle thing that they're not going to take any plays off. Because, I mean, it seems like such a small thing to play hard. Well, of course you're going to play hard, but think about some Bears teams in the past and just the way we saw them carry themselves in certain situations. And it's unfortunate. It's kind of embarrassing that we have to talk about it this way, that doing your job is a supposed big deal. But with what we've seen over the past 2 decades, unfortunately, it kind of is. And you hope that translates, that work ethic translates into the regular season.
Yeah, and like I think by the time people get into the NFL, everybody's playing hard, but are you it's not that are you playing hard, it's are you playing hard all the time. I think that's where the distinction comes in
Sure.
because there'll be guys that like, oh, they'll go hard, and then once the play's gone the other direction, they give up. Or they may take a play off here or there of wide receiver not completing routes. Um, it's doing your best all the way through until the whistle's blown that we're starting to see, and I think that's important. Does that does that make you a better team, versus a Kansas City in the regular season? Not necessarily, but it gets you closer. You add the talent with that hard playing mentality and that culture that you're adding. That starts going a long way.
Yeah. What I also like too is the fact that you're seeing some of these guys that are on the fringe. Obviously, you always have guys playing for a roster spot who are on the fringe where they know they have to show up, but you're seeing some guys who you're like, maybe there is something legit to them. They're not just having a good preseason. You talked about him. He shined this game, but I really like that Reddy Stewart kid. Again, I'm not saying he's going to be a star starter in the NFL, but if that's a potential depth piece right there, maybe you have something in him.
Yeah, I really like him. I think he can become a starter in this league. Um, and definitely an impactful, especially when you're in dime packages uh, and with injuries, like he's going to be a a good player in this league. And the Bears, I was texting one of my friends, and I was saying that the Bears have so much depth at cornerback that somebody that they cut is gonna end up on a roster somewhere. It's just there's way too much talent in that cornerback room, and overall, I know Ryan Poles made that comment that it's going to be tough to make this team. And if you look at some of those position groups that the Bears have, it is going to be a tough spot. The cornerback room. It's going to be very tough to make this roster. There's just so much talent. And
Right.
somebody that is a capable player of playing in this league on an active roster, not practice squad, is going to get cut from this team. Linebacker. There's a lot of talent on the linebacker. Wide receiver. There's a lot of talent in this wide receiver. There's like several positions where you're like, okay, we've got we've got actual decisions to make. Previous years, you were just like, it sort of the lines sort of drew themselves. You're like, okay, maybe do you keep a sixth wide receiver or a fifth running back? Like those kind of decisions were made, but there was really no surprises, and nobody was clamoring for the players the Bears cut. We're at the point now where you look at uh, you look at this Bears team, and you're like, okay, it is going to be tough. There are decisions. You look at edge rusher. We'll talk a little more about the addition at the Bears just made, but you look at the uh, the edge rushers they have, and they're probably going to keep five edge rushers, I'm guessing. And you've got Montez Sweat, Demarcus Walker, Daryl Taylor, who they just added, Jacob Martin, Austin Booker, Daniel Hardy, Dominique Robinson, and Khalid Kareem. And you know, Jacob Martin has been the name that you haven't heard that much, but he's uh, you know right behind Demarcus Walker as the second string on the official depth chart. So you've got one, two, three, four, five, six, seven. Is that two, four, eight guys vying for five spots? So there's actual competition here.
Having an actual competition is not a bad problem to have. Because like you said, obviously in some of these rebuild years and just some of the years where you're just straight up bad, you're like, okay, well, this, and this is going to make it, and maybe this guy comes here, but there wasn't really anything like overly exciting or anything where you're like, okay, it's not really going to make a difference. But now there are some areas where you could say, well, there's this many spots and there's this many guys. We were talking about a week ago about the running back room and how there are a number of candidates to make these running back spots when you got four, but you had maybe six prospective guys. Unfortunately, the Ian Wheeler thing, tearing his, what was it, his MCL?
ACL.
ACL? Okay. Obviously that eliminates that. Really, really sad to see. I was kind of rooting for him. But there was a legitimate conversation to be had, right?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. The speed that he has and his special team ability made him a guy that, you had a real decision to make. And it sucks when it sucks when an injury makes the decision for you.
Yeah,
But
you never want that to happen. I mean, especially for a guy who went undrafted, he was holding off his career to be, what was it, a doctor, a medical professional?
yeah, doctor.
Yeah, so he was holding off that to try to play football to fulfill his dream. And he got some good looks in preseason, got some time on Hard Knocks, and then, unfortunate injury just happened. But you were looking at him like this might be more than just a guy in camp. Now you have to make some other decisions too on the running back side. Just speaking of which, you kind of say, okay, does this make it easier for us to keep like Homer or maybe include Velus Jones on the roster as a running back? Those are conversations that are being had.
I mean, we know we've got DeAndre Swift. He's that number one guy.
Yep.
I'm going to pencil in Khalil Herbert as number two. I
Yep.
know that just because of experience and the fact that Roshan Johnson's dealing with some sort of injury. And it's really hard for fans and podcasters and beat writers, et cetera, to look at some of these things because the Bears, as a policy, don't discuss injuries during preseason. So, we don't know to the extent Roshan Johnson is hurt. Are they being precautious so he's available week one? Or is this something where, he might miss several weeks? We have no idea. So I'm going to put Herbert as two and then asterisk Roshan Johnson three. And then the question comes in is, are you keeping a fullback with Kari Blossom game? And what about Travis Homer? And then where does Velus Jones fit in? So it's going to be interesting how they construct this. And one of the sneaky positions I think the Bears have competition in is the tight end room.
Yeah, that doesn't get discussed a lot about because we know who TE1 is. Like, it's more
Yeah,
than obvious it's Cole Kmet, but beyond that, there are conversations to be had, yes.
I mean Gerald Everett is probably, you brought him in as a free agent. He's got to be your tight end too. Mercedes Lewis is just the consummate pro. Like I don't see how he's not making this
They
roster.
wouldn't have re-signed him if he wasn't going to make the roster,
Um,
right?
yeah, that would be shocking. But then the question is, will you keep four tight ends because Stephen Carlson and Ryan Bates um, have been good. You released Tommy Sweeney, so that's out of the question. But like Stephen Carlson has made a name for himself, and I wouldn't be surprised if I don't think they'll probably keep four tight ends, but I think they'll try it, put him on the practice squad.
Right.
Um, so yeah, I mean, there's some real competition battles, and there's some other ones where, the offensive line I think is not great.
I mean,
And
that's just an area where you're trying to figure out in general. You're not just looking for who's going to make that last spot or two as an offensive lineman on the team. You're trying to figure out how that whole unit is going to function as a whole.
yeah, oh God, it's a it's a mess, I think. And I said uh it's Brendan Bates, the tight end for the Bears. Um, I was looking at the Bears. The Bears have it wrong on their depth chart.
Of course they do.
Uh, I was like, it's not Ryan Bates. What is his first name? It's one of those things where you got it in your head because you just read it, and I can't think of it. With Brendan Bates, but they have Ryan Bates listed as on the depth chart as on the Bears or ChicagoBears.com.
Huh.
But yeah, the offensive line, I think that's going to get a big emphasis next offseason.
As it should.
But yeah, I mean, it's going to be this is actually going to be a cut down on Tuesday where I'm going to be actively surprised at the construction of this because you got new offensive coordinators. How is he going to want to construct this roster? How many offensive linemen are you going to take? How many wide receivers are you going to keep? And that's going to, greatly influence how you construct this roster is based on how you're going to be calling plays.
Right.
I do think Velus Jones makes this roster though.
I think so too. I'm
I mean,
still just kind of on the whole thing, but I think
I,
he will too. He'll be used on a special teams.
I mean, he's he's done it. He's done enough in the preseason, and he did some good things like on as a gunner. on special teams, and he made a few plays at running back when you get him in space. You can play him at wide receiver, and he's the best kickoff returner you have on the roster. I just don't know what they're going to do at because DeAndre Carter has just not had a good preseason.
No.
And he had another boneheaded play in this game where he got blocked into a punt, and the Bears end up turning it over and within the 10-yard line.
Yeah, and luckily they came up with the pick because, I mean, if that was a real regular season game, having momentum flip like that would just be an absolute gut punch.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, that's one of those plays that costs you a game.
Well, and I can even tell from like the initial angle from when it happened. I'm like, I think that dude touched the football.
Yeah, and it sucks. Like, I get it. Like, he's complaining he got blocked into it, and he did.
Right, right.
But get out of the way. Just somebody should be yelling, and you should just get out of the way. Don't let somebody push you into it.
Right, because if nobody touched it, the ball would have just kind of stayed there, and then they would have just got the ball wherever the ball fell. They would have, I mean, at that point, it was already being let go, and it wasn't like scooching all the way back. So, yeah, that's where you'd probably want to move to the side. I do get the frustration, like you said, but hey, it wasn't a regular season game, so take notes.
Let's see. In this game, I think over the last couple weeks, Tyson Bagent has just really cemented himself as the number 2 quarterback.
Yeah, he looked pretty good again in this game. I mean, they got the ball moving from the start and was looking very efficient on what he was doing. And he had a good game against the Bengals. And then after he had it here, it's like if there was any question about him being QB2, that's probably out the window at this point, I would say.
Yeah, now the question comes is how, as an organization, do you feel about Austin Reed, the undrafted rookie quarterback? Is if you if you feel good about him, are you going to risk uh you know trying to trade Brett Rippon as a veteran quarterback? You gonna Or are you gonna carry 2 quarterbacks on your practice squad? Like, I'm wondering what they're gonna do, how they're gonna make this play if you like that number 4 quarterback.
Well, it's really interesting you bring up trades and the quarterback depth because I don't know about you, but I'm seeing a lot of people out there speculating, asking, wondering, hoping, whatever, that the Bears try to find somebody to take Tyson Bagent like Jimmy Garoppolo when he was with the Patriots way back when. What are
Do
your
you
feelings on that?
It's so dumb. It's You have a backup quarterback that you can win you games, and it's how rare is it that you have your starting quarterback play the entire season? Is at some point you're going to need your backup quarterback to come in and win football games. And Tyson Bagent is by far and away the best backup option to win you football games.
Hmm.
And he makes no money. Like, it's not possible to make less money in the NFL than he's making. So why on earth would you trade him for, what are you going to get? 5th rounder? Like, what are you going to do with that? Why?
Well, I
Like,
think people are getting a little too ahead of themselves, especially like, oh, remember how Jimmy Garoppolo was traded and what he got? It's like, dude, he hasn't put up the numbers or quite what Jimmy Garoppolo did before he was traded.
and Jimmy
So,
Garoppolo was a 2nd round pick?
sounds right. I don't remember exactly, but it's not like you traded Kirk Cousins or you traded, some like you got the haul for Russell Wilson or something like that.
Um, but like, Jimmy Garoppolo was a backup for a few years to Tom Brady in a system where they were just humming along. So, and it was a different time. Like you're not gonna get whatever pick that they got in a Jimmy Garoppolo trade. Would you get a second rounder for him? Um, like you're not gonna get that. You're in, you know, like if somebody told me you could get a second round pick for Tyson Bagent and you would have to live with Brett Rippon, then that makes conversation a little more, I guess, uh, in in a realm of consideration. But knowing what you're going to get for Tyson Bagent, like why on earth would you take that? He's more valuable to you than whatever the pick you're going to get for him is.
Right. So I'm looking now, and just for context, Jimmy Garoppolo played 3 years in New England. He was the starter for 2 games. He played 17 games total, 690 yards, 5 touchdowns, no interceptions, and he completed 67% of his passes. And when he was traded to San Francisco, that was, let's see, 2017. And he was traded for, let's see, the transaction. Traded. It doesn't tell you. That's weird. Just says traded QB Jimmy Garoppolo to the 49ers. Doesn't actually tell you. I'm on Football Reference. That's really weird because it usually tells you
And Jimmy
what.
Garoppolo was a second round draft pick in 2014.
There we go. Okay. So I just wanted to double check
And
on
I
what that
and,
is.
and um I believe he was traded for a second round pick.
So, I mean, Jimmy Garoppolo didn't play a shit ton in New England, but he racked up a bit more than 4 career games when he was traded for a second round pick. He was in that New England system for 3 years before he was traded. And remember, Tyson Bagent, he started 4 games last year while Justin Fields was hurt,
Mm-hmm.
won a few, had his moments. I think has looked better in this preseason, has the potential to be a very good backup. I'm just saying, like, going out there and demanding the world for Tyson Bagent at this point in a trade, it's not realistic. And like you said, it's good to have a good backup that you can rely on. That's cheap. Backups are expensive, very expensive. So I'm with you in saying, hey, I don't even want to think about trading Tyson Bagent at this point.
And Jimmy Garoppolo have been on the Patriots for 3 seasons. He had one more season before he was going to be a free agent. And do you want to pay a backup quarterback and pay Tom Brady? Like, and you can get a second round pick. It was a different scenario, made a lot more sense. Tyson Bagent's in his second year. You're paying him nothing. You've got a couple of years before you've got to pay him, and the compensation is going to be a whole lot less. Now, if God forbid Caleb gets hurt for a significant amount of time this season, and Tyson Bagent comes in and looks like a rock star, then maybe that conversation changes. But for now, I don't. You're trying to build a winning franchise right now. Don't you've got what you feel is a good backup quarterback and that's very inexpensive. Just keep him and you know not worry about some late round draft pick that you could possibly get.
Right. Exactly.
Um, but in this game here, um, I was looking at some of the players that are on the bubble and what they did to either pro or con making this team. To various more played really well, I think, in this game. He had one missed tackle that was noticeable, but other than that, I thought I thought he played really well. Um, and that bodes well for him. And whether or not he makes this roster, I don't know. But as far as getting another job somewhere else, yeah, I think people are going to take notice.
Yeah.
Uh, Travis Homer, meh, and he dropped a pass. Uh,
I don't know. You think he's gonna make it out of camp? Because I'm a little iffy on that.
um, I don't know. Uh, Ian Wheeler being hurt gives credence to him being on this roster. I don't think both guys would make the. And depending on if the Bears really feel that Velus Jones can be a running back, I don't know. I think I, I have a feeling that Travis Homer, so I think the Bears are going to try to be run heavy. I think Travis Homer probably makes this team, but I'm also, if he gets cut, I would not be shocked.
Yeah,
His
I just don't know if you're getting much out of him.
his value is on special teams.
And it's replaceable value. I mean, obviously, like he's a blocker, he's a special teamer, but like as a running back, eh. And I know that that throw was a little behind him, the one that you were referencing, but that's still one you want to haul in.
If it hits you in the cans and you're on the NFL roster, you better catch that. Um, Blackwell, he was another guy that had a missed tackle, but he's played pretty well. I think he's probably going to make this roster. Ian Wheeler tore his ACL. He's done. Um, let's see. Simba Webster, he I thought as the preseason as a whole was going to make that conversation at wide receiver a little more difficult, which I was surprised about. But they put him on IR with a groin injury, so he's done. Um, Douglas Coleman got the really bad injury, the neck injury, sent to the hospital, so he's done. Keith Randolph was already released with an injury settlement. I don't know what the injury is or where it happened, but um, I wonder if at some point he comes back on the practice squad or if they're just sort of done with him. Tommy Sweeney was just released, period.
Mm-hmm.
DeAndre Carter just has had a lot of blunders on, and he was brought in as a veteran that could return punts, and I don't think he's done anything that's been worthwhile.
Yeah, I kind of liked bringing him in, but like you said, the results this preseason just have not been there.
Don't be surprised if the Bears watch the waiver wire on cut down day and then bring in another punt returner, because I don't love their punt returners on this team.
I don't either. I don't
Um,
either.
you know, it there's a possibility. You're not going to love it. Dante Pettis is our punt returner this year.
Yeah, meh. Just meh. That's all I gotta say. Just meh.
Freddie Swain went on the IR. Um, Noah Sewell has been hurt most of the preseason, and he didn't play that well. And he's a potential guy and a draft pick. But I think he's probably got the inside track for making this squad, but I don't know. He's been outplayed by guys that have come in and actually been healthy. So um, I wonder if the Bears put Noah Sewell on the injured list and designate him to come back and then see how the other guys play. Reddy Stewart, I think he's had a phenomenal training or a preseason, and it really capped in this game where he had a interception in the end zone to prevent a touchdown, and then intercepted another one that he returned for a touchdown.
It was a 14-point swing, all on him.
Mm-hmm. And then a guy I really like, and I'm nervous he's not going to make this roster is Daniel Hardy.
Yeah, yeah. It's interesting you bring him up.
Um, he's had some big flashes, and I don't think he is a guy that you're going to rely on for consistent pass rush. He's not going to be, your starter opposite Montez Sweat. But in the back end of that rotation, he is a hits principal guy. And he was on the practice squad all last year. And he's come in this camp and he's a guy that was a throwaway guy that that hustled and hustled and hustled. And he kept working and has made plays and has done everything asked of him. And I would like to see him get rewarded with that opportunity to make this roster.
Yeah, I can I can agree with that.
Um, I'm looking at this list and of edge rushers, and I think you probably keep five. It's my guess. And they've got eight. Montez Sweat is a no-brainer.
Yeah.
I think Demarcus Walker's a no-brainer, especially considering that on passing downs, you can kick him in to play defensive tackle and get pass rush from the interior. You just traded for Darrell Taylor, so he's probably making this roster. That's three.
I like that move.
Yeah, I want to talk about it in a second. Jacob Martin, you had high on your depth chart. Austin Booker was a draft pick, so I think he roster. That's four. So between Jacob Martin, Daniel Hardy, Dominique Robinson, and Khalid Kareem, you're probably just keeping one dude. And I think Dominique Robinson, I think it might be run out of chances.
I was just going to ask that. Are his days here numbered?
Um, if they let him go, I have a feeling that they'll probably try to put him on the practice squad. But I think the fact that he was a third round draft pick or whatever, fourth round,
He
I
was
think
in Poles' first draft.
yes, and I think that's the opportunities he was given, and I think they thought he was going to be what Austin Booker is looking like he's going to be, and he hasn't materialized, and this is year three, and I was hoping that you would see some strides taken in camp and in preseason, and just haven't seen it.
Felt like the peak of his tenure as a Bear was that week one game against San Francisco in the monsoon.
Yeah, it's just, has he played bad this preseason? No, but has he separated himself? I mean, I think out of Daniel Hardy, Dominique Robinson, and Khalid Kareem, he's been the least noticeable and made the least number of splashy plays.
Right, right.
Um, so I do want to talk about, the Darrell Taylor trade. And I think this was a sneaky good move.
I do too.
Um, he's got 1 year left on his deal. So this is the only year that he's gonna be on this or under contract. It's like something like $3 million. So it's not a significant value. Um,
And he traded what, a 6th round pick to get him?
he traded a sixth round pick for him, and the guy is hits principle like if I've ever seen it. I don't know if did you ever watch that play where a, there was a defensive return? I don't remember if it was a fumble or an interception, and one of the players ran off the sideline to help block.
Yeah, that was him.
That was him.
That was so funny because I remember the play, but I didn't remember who it was, and I didn't realize that was him until somebody posted that on Twitter, and it caught my eye, and I thought it was hilarious. And when you look at a guy like him and you think, okay, he's been pretty much a depth piece over there in Seattle these past few years, but if you actually look at his numbers, like they're pretty solid in terms of sack numbers.
I mean, they're not bad. He missed his, I think, all of his rookie season with an injury, but the sack numbers have been, and the pass rush numbers, like the pressures, have been pretty good.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I, you know, early on, the guy's got to learn the defense. So you're you're probably going to put him in. He's going to be late in your rotation and probably just going in on pass rush downs, obvious pass rush downs. But once he gets up to speed, I think this is a guy. He's one of those like nonstop motors, and getting him for $3 million and a 6th round pick, I think that's going to prove to be pretty good.
Yeah, I think that's good value. Now, if you look at what the Bears have done with these two trades, we'll obviously, talk about the other one, but like I said before, they traded for him for a 6th round pick. And what did we know that the Bears did or tried to do about a week or so ago? They tried to get Judon.
Yep.
They knew that they needed more pass rush. Matt Eberflus came out and said, hey, pass rush is our big concern. This is our concern, dude. So you try to get Judon. You have an opening to get him. They won't take the extension. That's what Ryan Poles wanted. So it didn't end up working out. So
And I
he
agree with
pivots.
that. Is if you're giving up a 3rd round pick, I think I think you have to get more than the 1 year out of the guy.
I agree. I agree. And, where I'm trying to go with this is you had to pivot, and pivot isn't always going to look sexy or as good or better than your original plan, or else it wouldn't have been your original plan. But you saw Ryan Poles handle this well instead of going out and making a panic move. And what did we see from Ryan Pace on a number of times?
A panicky Pete.
Exactly. Hello, my name is Panicky Pete. I mean Ryan Poles.
Yeah, I thought this was a good pivot. Um, you know, I so uh they got a guy in Taylor who was probably on the roster bubble, and they went to Seattle like, let's make your roster decision easier. We want that dude, and we'll give you a 6th round pick. And it's essentially your, rather than wait and try to get a waiver claim in once teams make cuts, uh, you you're bypassing that and just guaranteeing yourself, with a late round draft pick. And I think that's the right thing to do. That's the way to optimize sometimes those late round picks, because you you know what are the odds a 6th round pick makes your squad is impactful? Not that high.
It's not that high. So the fact that you're trading, I call them like the equivalent of 7-Eleven lottery tickets that you buy for a few bucks.
Yeah. Um, and then the other move that they made was they got an interior defensive lineman in Chris Williams, who played for Flus in Indianapolis. And he was a guy that made the roster as an undrafted rookie and worked his way. And as Flus said, has improved both as a run defender and as a pass rusher. And I think he had like 2.5 sacks last year, but as an interior defensive lineman, that's pretty good. And he's a length guy. If we know anything about Ryan Poles, he loves guys that are long. And Chris Williams is a long guy and comes with the flu seal of approval. So he's going to know like the hits principle, and it's not going to be learning the culture. and he's especially where like I like Jervon Dexter and I like Andrew Billings. I think those two are very good, but the depth at defensive interior defensive line leaves a lot to be desired. And
Yes.
trading, especially with Zach Pickens being banged up a bit, I think I think this move was a good one. And you got him for even less than you got Taylor for. This was a pick swap. You gave up a sixth rounder, but you got a seventh rounder back. So it's pretty much the equivalent of a seventh round pick.
Right. And now remind me too, I believe I saw that the sixth pick they traded for Darrell Taylor, wasn't that the Chase Claypool pick, the pick they got in the trade from the Miami Dolphins?
The Chris Williams one was that one.
That okay, okay. I was because I knew that pick went in one of these. So, hey, maybe you turn Chase Claypool into a useful depth defender.
If you turn him in anything, then that's a
Yeah. Honestly, I mean, you could have sold Chase Claypool for a pack of packing peanuts.
yeah.
By the way, Darrell Taylor, I just wanted to bring this up. He's played in 49 NFL games. He has 21 and a half sacks. In 2022, he had 9.5 that year. So, not too shabby.
I mean, it was a down year for him last year, and I think he probably, if you look at all the advanced metrics, probably was a better player than Yannick Ngakwe. And
Who's
I think
still
that,
sitting on the couch right now.
yeah, and I think the Bears probably talked to him. I think he was probably that last resort if you couldn't bring somebody else. So Taylor is still what 27? Like he's still young.
Yeah,
He
27.
he's younger than Ngakwe. He's going to be cheaper than Ngakwe and more productive for than Ngakwe was last year. So I I think this was the right move.
Yeah, I agree. I said before that I wouldn't mind a reunion with Yannick Ngakoue, but I also said that like over a month ago. And the fact that nobody's picked up on him yet, the fact that the Panthers said no, and the fact that you made a move like this, I'm kind of glad they did this. And listen, getting Judon would have been the sexiest thing of all. We know that, but it didn't work. It didn't happen. So as I said before, if you're going to pivot, pivot smartly. And I
Yeah,
think this is pivoting smartly.
yeah. I mean, I have no idea what happens behind the scenes, but Ryan Poles makes me feel like whenever he's making decisions, he's got a plan B ready to go. That it's not that's not a complete knee jerk reaction because plan A didn't work out. And that's the way he at least makes me feel.
Yeah, that's kind of what I look optimistically when I see Ryan Poles kind of handle his business is I like to believe he does his due diligence on everything and obviously has that tier list of priorities and plan A, plan B, plan C. And yes, every NFL GM, good or bad, tries to have that basic approach, but it is very easy. And we've seen it not only with the Bears, but with plenty of other teams where it's very easy to just panic. It's very easy to panic. You don't even have to say, hey, panic is plan B. You could go straight to panicking, even if you have a plan B, plan C, plan D before last resort. I truly believe, and this is just me talking as a fan without any insider knowledge. I think it's very easy to go out there and kind of panic, even if it's not your plan B after plan A doesn't work. I mean, you could easily have pivoted to giving up a second or third rounder for somebody that didn't deserve it. And you didn't.
And it's easy as fans to just be like, well, they should have done this or should have done that. Is I I do a lot of mock drafts during before the NFL draft, and I use like the AI versions where the computer picks for the other teams. And even those, like if like sometimes you're just bored, you know, and you just kind of do it just for fun. But when you're really trying to like, all right, this is, I want to see what the best we can do here is. And those, those sometimes if you're not prepared and the draft just starts going a different way than you expected, and like a guy that you are like, oh, okay, I'm going to draft this guy, I'm expecting to fall, and he's not there, and suddenly you're left scrambling. You're like, oh God, this my guy's not here, and I think I'm overdrafting if I go to this other position, and you're trying to make a trade, and none of the computer teams want to trade with you, and you're you suddenly left scrambling, and then you look at the draft afterwards, and you're like, man, I hate this draft, and that those kind of things happen in is an NFL GM. Like you've just got to be prepared for what are you going to do if this player goes down with injury, or what are you going to do if you know uh, the guy you want to draft is off the board when you get there. What are you going to do if you realize in camp that you need another pass rusher and there's none left on the market that you're really confident in? And what if you try to trade for somebody and you don't get that deal done? Like it's all these having another plan in place that makes that makes the difference between being a good organization and being a bad organization.
Well, and think about this too, is with the Matthew Judon thing, Ryan Poles clearly wanted to get an extension done with Judon because he didn't want him for that 1 year to give up a draft pick that high. So he knew that not only would you have to agree upon a trade, they would need to agree upon this extension or the ability to do an extension. So that's two things that needed to happen right for the Bears to get him. So Ryan Poles most likely understood that you're going to really want a plan B or a pivot plan because you have to make both those things work.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's when you're trying to negotiate a multi-year, multi-million dollar contract, like they're doing this really quickly. And
Right.
you know, having having that all uh, you know, ironed out. And kudos to the Bears to sticking to their guns, because it's real easy. Ryan Pace was notorious for this. Like Ryan Pace would have just either made that trade and had the player for a third round for one season, or he would have just way overpaid for that guy when push came to shove. Like kudos to Ryan Poles for having parameters in place of what he was willing to do and what he wasn't willing to do, and he made that offer. It was not accepted, and he was like, you know what, I'm not gonna make this trade for a guy for 1 year and then have to compete in the open market for him next year.
Right. It all makes sense.
Yeah, so I mean, you ended up pivoting and trading for a guy that is not Matthew Judon. Like Matthew Judon, I think would have been a huge coup for the Bears. I think that would have having Judon and Sweat opposite each other. I think that's just a really darn good
I
defense
know.
tandem. And
It
we've all
does hurt a
yeah,
little bit that didn't work out.
yeah. But I think you're going to see some good things. Now, when I look at the Bears on defense, what they what they've done on defense this preseason is they've shown a lot of cornerback blitzes that they didn't do last season.
Yeah. The Kyler Gordon one was not the only one. It was
Because
just
there
the most noticeable.
there was quite a few, and um, I I wonder if uh, if this is a a new wrinkle that they're introducing, or um, if if this is going to be I guess, a ploy, or he's trying to show something they're not really going to do, like where he's showing offenses like, yeah, I can do this. You better be prepared for this. And you have, um, teams having to prepare for this cornerback blitz that may or may not come. And so while we're recording, I'm watching the fourth quarter of the Bears game that I didn't finish watching before. I just watched the first three quarters, and man, Scott was returning a kick and got that face mask yanked. How did that not break his neck?
It's kind of surprising how there aren't more injuries from face mask grabs because think about it. A lot of these face mask grabs are happening during a play, and a lot of the times they're going hard. So think about it. You're going at a hard velocity and you have that face mask grab. The rest of your body is still carrying momentum while your neck and head are not.
Yeah, I mean, in this case, it looked like the chin strap kind of broke off, and he just yanked the helmet at a certain point. But man, that looked brutal.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, sorry. Back to my point is, I wonder if he's showing that a lot just to get teams having to prepare for it, and just having it in his arsenal, if need be. Because obviously you don't want to have to do a cornerback blitz. You want to be able to get pressure with your front four, but having that in your arsenal, is definitely a good thing. But I would like to not have to rely on it.
Yeah, for sure.
Uh, so, here we are. We're just, you know, 2 days from the final cut down, and we're on you know, the a week away or so, week and a half away from the first game of the season. 2 weeks,
Two
2 weeks
weeks.
away, 2 weeks from the first game of the season. After watching the preseason and the moves that the Bears have made, how are you feeling?
I'm feeling solid. I'm going to say solid because I think that this team has enough defenders that's going to win and keep you in a lot of games. So you have the schedule in the first half of the season where you don't see your division, and you have a schedule that's more manageable than it could be. You're not playing the Eagles, you're not playing Dallas, you're playing the 49ers. That's going to be your most difficult conference non-division game, but there's a number of good teams out there you're not playing. So you have a manageable schedule, and what we saw in the second half of last year was a defense that can keep you in games. How good is that defense going to be regular season? I don't really know. Sometimes I worry if we overrate it a little bit, like when the starters go in and they say, hey, you know what? We're just going to keep the ball over the middle and we're just going to keep taking those 10-yard chunks, that cushion that this defense tends to give you, and just dink and dunk our way downfield. And that's kind of one of my concerns, but I do think it's got enough talent and playmakers where they'll be able to hold some teams down for a good amount of the game and then generate a turnover or two in a timely manner. So, like, if you told me, hey, you need to win this game against, I'll think of one of their opponents, like the Panthers, obviously. Like, if it's like, hey, you need to hold them, okay, I feel good. If you need to beat, like, the Patriots 17-10, yeah, I think the Bears can do that. So I feel decently about that. Just with the offense, we don't know what Caleb Williams is going to be. There's a lot of promise, but we don't know. But what we do know is that regardless of what he's going to be, is there's going to be growing pains. There's going to be a lot of growing pains. But I think we'll also see some really good things as well. And you obviously have the playmakers on offense, whether it's DJ Moore or Roma Dunze or Keenan Allen or DeAndre Swift or Cole Kmet, you have enough playmakers to help you even when things might be a little shaky early on. So, what I'm trying to say here is I don't think that I'm going to put the offense up there with the Chiefs or the Lions or the Eagles or Dallas in the regular season, emphasis on regular season, or San Francisco. I at least think there's enough talent where you can generate enough offense with that defense to win you a handful of games. So I feel solid about this team between the schedule, the roster, and the potential. The potential is high, but you have to reach that potential before we can count on it. I do think some people are underestimating the growing pains we're going to see from this team. I do think, too, there is the matter of the fact this division, I think, is very, very good. And I'm going to say this as well. I think there is a lot of dismissing of the Detroit Lions. That team is stacked. And I know the Bears played well against them last year, but they're going to be really stinking good. I would not be surprised if they won the NFC this year. Also, Green Bay, they're always good. Matt LaFleur so far has coached circles around you. So that's going to be tough. That's going to be really tough. I see a 9-ish win team. That's where I'm at right now. Your thoughts on what I said?
I agree with you. This division is really tough. And the fact JJ McCarthy's injury makes it more reasonable because I think if JJ McCarthy's playing and he probably doesn't start, they probably put him in as soon as Darnold falters week 3 or whatever it is. And but I think he would keep you in there. And I think they were a sneaky good team. But it gives you a clear-cut team that's probably going to be last place. And now it's going to come down to, I agree with you that I think the Lions are stacked, but this is a quarterback-driven league. And at best, okay, it's looking like Jordan Love right now is probably the best quarterback in the division. But
you think so over Jared Goff?
I'm not a Jared Goff believer. I don't think he's terrible. I just think he is at best the game manager.
I mean, I do agree that a lot of Jared Goff's success is because of the line in front of him, the scheme, and the weapons he has. I mean, my thought on Jared Goff has always been he's not going to win you games on his own per se, but when you have a plan and an execution, he'll execute it. Like he's a smart quarterback where he'll know the system, he'll know where the ball needs to go, and when you scheme your guys where the ball needs to be, you scheme your guys open, ball needs to go there, you protect him, they got a great offensive line, then he executes very, very well.
He's younger Kirk Cousins.
Yeah. Though I would say Jared Goff is a bit more accomplished in terms of winning the big games because remember,
Fair.
he did make it to a Super Bowl. He's been because I mean Kirk Cousins, has he ever even been to the NFC Championship?
No.
And Jared Goff has been to multiple. He's been to multiple NFC Championships and a Super Bowl. So I would say he's more accomplished than Kirk Cousins. I think Kirk Cousins might have a bit more raw talent on him, but in the bigger game, I think Jared Goff has shown you more.
Yeah, I agree. I'm just still not a believer. I mean, if you go through and you're like, all right, I'm going to the Super Bowl and I need to win this game. This is it. Are you taking Jared Goff over Joe Burrow?
Probably not. No.
Are you taking him over Patrick Mahomes?
Oh, I wouldn't take anybody over Patrick Mahomes.
Are you taking him over Brock Purdy?
Maybe. Maybe.
Um, are you taking him over healthy Aaron Rodgers?
No, because healthy Aaron Rodgers might be the best quarterback ever.
Are you taking him over Josh Allen?
Maybe. Because you know what? He's played in the big game. Josh Allen is not. And as good as Josh Allen is, he gets a little too reckless for my liking.
Ooh, that's a tough one for me to swallow. I think Josh Allen is real good.
I think he is too, but
Especially considering that he has no weapons.
I don't disagree, but look at the track record in those big games. I just
Look at the coaching he's had with him too, though, and the offensive line.
I'm not saying I'm not
Jared Goff
saying
has played with great offensive lines pretty much his whole career.
I'm not saying Jared Goff is more talented or as talented as Josh Allen. Don't get that mixed up. I'm just kind of going off of their resume and what they've shown me in a big game.
I'm I'm not shitting on Jared Goff. I'm just saying is I'm not the biggest believer of him. Um, and if you asked me right now, would I rather have Jared Goff, given where he's at right now, and his the contract that he gets right now, or would I rather have Caleb Williams with the potential that Caleb Williams has?
Well, yeah, I mean, Caleb Williams has a higher ceiling. Obviously, we don't know how high he's going to reach that ceiling, but yes, he's got a higher ceiling because the hope with Caleb Williams is that he is an elite quarterback. Because when you have an elite quarterback, your window is so much different to contend. Because often in the NFL, when you have a good team with like a mid-tier quarterback, your windows can be pretty short for contending. I mean, remember the Jaguars in like the mid late 2010s? Remember when they had that brief spell where it looked like
Yep.
they could go to the Super Bowl, but
Mm-hmm.
you didn't have Tom Brady or a Drew Brees or an Aaron Rodgers or a Pat Mahomes or a Peyton Manning, because those are the types of quarterbacks where you can say, even if your team's not at your best, you can make a run with them because of how good they are. Look at Peyton Manning and Drew Brees. It's you didn't always have the best teams around, and look what they could still do. Look at even the Packers, all those years where you're like, outside Aaron Rodgers, this team isn't all that's cracked up a beat, but because you had Aaron Rodgers, you won every year. And I agree, Jared Goff is not on that tier for me. I mean, I would say Jared Goff is in the top 15 quarterbacks, but he's not Pat Mahomes. He's not Joe Burrow. He's not Lamar Jackson. Talent wise, he's not Josh Allen. I'm going to say that talent wise, he's not Josh Allen. Um, would he, how would you compare him to Khalil or not Khalil Herbert, Justin Herbert?
I,
I think Justin Herbert's more talented, but
I am not the biggest believer in Justin Herbert.
which
I
is fair. I get it.
is Does he have talent? Oh, absolutely. The guy's thrown for 4,000 yards in the league. But do I think he's a quarterback that's going to win you a Super Bowl? I'm suspect.
I'd like to see him on a good team. Because look at the Chargers. You've had coaching woes, you've had defensive woes. You've never had a completely good team there. Like, could you imagine if the Detroit Lions had the potential with Justin Herbert as their quarterback?
Yeah.
I'm just saying.
Um, so like my point is, all right, so I in this division, the Lions, the Lions are a very good team.
I
And
think they're the best on paper team.
their biggest holes, they on paper made those holes, they plugged those holes. Are they great plugs? I don't know. But on paper, they plugged them. And you have your offensive coordinator come back, which was a miracle. That was a miracle
For
that
the
he came
second
back.
straight year.
Yeah. Um, so I I feel like this was a on paper, the Lions are a really, really good team. But like I said, is if they don't have a top 10 quarterback, which I don't think they do, is it makes them beatable. That's just my caveat. Um, is I look at the Packers and I want to be careful because just like the Cardinals, the St. Louis Cardinals, they have this voodoo magic. And they don't have any top tier wide receivers. Yet those guys keep making plays. They get schemed open. And I still think getting rid of their running back and then getting uh uh the guy from the Raiders, Josh Martin.
Yeah, because Aaron Jones went to the Vikings.
Yeah. Aaron Jones, I think, was like part of the cog that made that offense go.
I don't think Aaron Jones got enough credit for that.
Josh Jacobs, sorry. Josh Jacobs is a very, very hard runner, tough guy to tackle. I just don't think he brings the same energy that Aaron Jones does. And I think it's going to hurt. I mean, I could be wrong. I think the offense is going to not work the same way.
I just think Matt LaFleur is such a good coach, and he's just going to find a way.
I think he's a terrific coach. He's an absolutely terrific head coach.
And are we ever going to be able to beat him? Because I don't see Matt Eberflus out coaching him. I just don't.
I don't know if you need to outcoach him. You just need to not get lapped by him as a coach, and the players have to make it on the field. Like
I agree. Yes, of course.
And you can't have breakdowns. So like when he's absolutely just scorching your defense and scheming things open. And I'm a big believer that a lot of plays that break down, it's not necessarily the players, oh, he just forgot his assignment or whatever. It's a good offensive coach puts a defensive player in a stress position where they've got to make a choice or they've got to make a decision on what they're going to do. And if they choose wrong, then that play is suddenly broken down. And you create that breakdown with an offensive scheme or with talented players. And I think Matt LaFleur creates those broken plays for his quarterback. And I still, maybe I'm being a hater. I don't think Jordan Love is an exceptional quarterback. I think he's an okay quarterback that's put in a good system for him.
Yeah, and here's the thing. I think Jordan Love has the right system in front of him. He's got the right trenches in front of him. And I think he's got good enough athleticism to make things work.
And we saw how pedestrian he looked a lot of times last season. Just not against the Bears, but in other games, he looked very pedestrian. And part of that is they just won't give that their quarterbacks, any of their quarterbacks, they will not give them like top flight receivers. Like they won't invest in that. So like if you told me that you're Biff and you came from the future and the Packers win this division, all right, I'm not going to argue with you. I could see a path for that happening. But if you tell me the Packers finish third behind the Lions and the Bears, I'm not going to be shocked by that either.
No, I hear you. I hear you.
So I'm with you. I don't think the Bears win this division, but 9 to 10 wins seems very realistic.
Yeah, and at least 9 to 10 wins will have you in the conversation of a playoff spot.
I think for the whole season, they're going to be in the hunt graphic.
Right. Well, and I
Right
mean,
to the end.
here's the thing is I want to see them play meaningful football until the end. And I'm not talking about like, oh, you're 4-8, but you're quote in the hunt. No, I'm talking about you're legitimately have one of those spots or you're right outside. Not like,
Right.
oh, well, you're in the hunt, but you got two teams in front of you and you're back like 2.5 games with like 3 weeks to go. Like, no, not like that.
Agreed. Um, and the fact that they have a winnable schedule helps. Um, it's going to be how do they minimize the rookie mistakes of a rookie quarterback, and does that offensive line hold up?
Yeah, that's my concern.
If the offensive line for the majority plays them healthy the majority of the season, where you've got at least 13 or 14, a bare minimum 13 or 14 games of your offensive line playing together with the starting unit, I think the playoffs are a possibility. If you are living and breathing with your backup offensive lineman for a big chunk of the season, this is going to be a frustrating season. It's going to be like watching a sports car drive around with flat tires.
Right.
So, yeah, it's I'm excited. This is the most excited I've been for a Bears season in a long time. And I'm excited about all the seasons. So, this is I feel like the Bears are on the cusp of something.
Well, and I mean, you're not the only one. I feel like when you read the whole fan base, they're feeling more excitement than they felt in a number of years. I mean, I think the last time we were anticipating this type of a season, obviously didn't happen, was 2019 when we were coming off the division win in 2018. Obviously, we saw how that turned out, but that was the last time I remember us being this hyped for a season.
Right.
Maybe this is more than 2019. I don't know, but there were hefty expectations going into 2019. And then our hope was immediately dashed in week one. And that was the funniest thing about the Matt Nagy era is that the good vibes literally only lasted 2018 because week one in 2019, that freaking thud against the Packers when they lost 10-3, everyone kind of sat there and said, oh, this this isn't good. Like this is not good.
That the defense was still playing well.
Yes, it was, but the
That
offense
offense
was
was so just ungodly brutal.
yeah, it was completely discombobulated.
I just I I couldn't I couldn't believe myself. I remember exactly where I was. Is my friend Brad had people over at his house, and he played the game outdoors, and a bunch of his neighbors and stuff were there, and I was trying to be on my best behavior because I didn't know a lot of these people. But if I was at home, I would have lost my shit.
I remember I was just sitting in my room with my TV watching it, just and I just remember raging. I was in the shower, getting ready to go to bed, and I was sitting in the shower as the warm water was pouring on my face, just ranting to myself about what I just saw. And what's funny when you mentioned what you were doing, I'm like, okay, here's this guy that not a lot of people know, and he's suddenly getting on his puke stilts and just going blah blah blah.
Who is this maniac?
Blah blah blah.
Uh, yeah, so I'm hoping we don't shit the bed. And I'm it makes me happy that they're starting the season off with the Titans.
I know, but they've looked kind of good. I know it's preseason, but
I
I
want
don't think
to
Will Levis is the pushover. I mean, I don't know. I don't know. I just don't take a game for granted. You know
no,
what I'm saying?
it's the NFL. You can't take any game for granted.
Right.
I just nothing about that team is like puts fear in my heart. Like
No, on paper, no.
when you play the Packers, like you have that fear just because they've kicked your ass so consistently. Um, it's it's the Titans have nothing in their like their defense. Nothing about them goes, oh man, that this is a tough opponent. And sure, they could very easily win. It's the NFL any given Sunday. But I I think it's a good opponent to start with, uh, because I don't think I don't think they're going to, um, I don't think they have a crazy good defense, and they don't have a ton of offensive weapons. Um, it should be a time to showcase the Bears' skill players and what they can do. Uh, but you know, I try with preseason to take everything with a grain of salt.
Absolutely. As you should. Remember, the 0-16 2008 Lions were 4-0 in the preseason.
Right. Um, but if you look at what the Bears did, finishing the preseason undefeated and the margin of victory and how few points they allowed, it's historically teams that have done that have made the playoffs. And here's what I have to say is, a lot of times you're like, oh, well, they're playing against backups. But most of the time, it's your backups versus their backups.
Right. It is a testament to your depth.
And I read Greg Gabriel, former Bears scout, something he wrote, and he was saying that, when you look at the Bears, when you starter versus starter, most of the time the Bears starters looked better. And we could see when it was backup versus backup, the backup for the Bears were clearly better because the Bears have just by a lot outscored their opponents. And, you know, it, it, it's it's such a small sample size where you're starter versus starter in the preseason, but you feel you feel like something is going well. And if you can get that, after a few games, really have Caleb Williams dialed in, I think the weapons around him are so good that, you could start putting up some points. And if you can put up points, this defense is good enough to limit any team from, you know, like if you can put up 27 points, you're going to win a whole lot of games.
Right.
And we've seen this Bears defense do well where they have to keep you scored below 20. And if you give them where they're not playing from behind and they can actually pin their ears back and put you in a position where you can't run the like when the other team's up or it's a close game and you don't make them become one dimensional, the Bears have still done well. If the Bears can get into the driver's seat in the second half and teams start having to go a little one dimensional where they're just passing, is you're going to see more sacks. You're going to see more interceptions. I, I, I would love to see the opportunity for the Bears to have more chances of playing one-dimensional football.
Yeah, I totally agree. Totally agree. Well said.
All right, should we talk baseball here?
Yeah, sure.
Well, the White Sox have hit 100 losses.
It's August 25th, by the way. It's August 25th, and the White Sox have lost 100 games.
They are on pace for 124 losses. They are 31 and 100. We were wrong that they didn't hit 100 losses before 30 wins, but the fact that it's 31 and 100, we were not that far off either.
Yeah, that's just brutal. I mean, the fact that you're in conversation to have the worst record ever is nuts.
I mean, they're 131 games into the season. So there's like a month left, and you are still on pace for that worst record ever. We're not at the point where it's like, oh, that they'll figure things out. No, this is just who they are.
Yeah, it was kind of like, okay, at the beginning of the year, you thought, wow, you had a chance at this. And there was a very brief stretch where it's like, okay, you're probably not going to. And then ever since that first 14 game losing streak, then you're like, oh, maybe there is a chance. And then they went on the 20 game losing streak, and you're like, well, now there's a real good chance. And you're sitting here with a strong possibility that you might accomplish that feat. And I don't mean accomplish in the word that we would like to use the word accomplish.
Yeah, and today you just got beat beat around by a division rival. Um, and
They
it's
kicked your ass all weekend.
Yeah, absolutely. They just kicked the shit out of you. Uh, it's not like the Tigers are like ass beaters or
No, they're a 500 team. They're basically the Cubs.
but there you are just getting your ass beat.
Boy, I'm looking at the results right now for this team. Let's see. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. You've won 16 games since Memorial Day. Since Memorial Day. You've won 4 games since the All-Star break. In mid-July. It's late August. 4. And if you look at some of the splits for this team, I mean, you're 18 and 46 at home. You're 13 and 53 on the road. You haven't won double-digit games in a single month all year. Here are your totals. March 0 and 3, April 6 and 21, May 9 and 19, June 9 and 19, July 3 and 22, August 4 and 15. So congratulations, you beat your July win total. You will have exceeded that already. You won 3 games in the month of July.
I mean, they were a bad team, but July just absolutely cemented that they're uh just a trash team.
I mean, even if you won like 6, 7 more games, you'd still far and away be the worst in that month.
So, um, pulling
My
up
goodness.
standings here is if the White Sox win every single game for the rest of the season, they're still going to finish last in their division.
Oof.
Even if they win every single game the rest of the season and Detroit loses every game for the rest of the season, mathematically they cannot finish outside of last place in this division. And in fact, they would they're mathematically they would be mathematically last place in the AL East, in the AL Central, and if they won every, they wouldn't mathematically be last in the AL East, but they would be mathematically last in the NL Central. Like four of the divisions in baseball, no, like if you won your last 31 baseball games in a row, you still couldn't finish out of last place, regardless of what the teams in front of you did.
Wow.
Like that's sad. So the best they can do is 62 wins. And Toronto's currently, every team in the AL East is above 62 wins. Every other team in the AL Central is above 62 wins. Every team in the NL Central is 62 wins or above. In the NL West, every team except Colorado is above 62 wins. Like that's that's sad that you could go on a 31 game winning streak and still lose in 4 out of the 6 divisions in baseball.
Jeez. Hey, have you ever wondered what their record is in division?
Yes.
Guess how many wins they have in division. Take a guess.
Oof. In division. Um, um, yeah. Can you give me how many games have they played in division?
Oh, geez, I'd have to do the math there. Let's
I'm
see.
gonna go with, I don't know. Let's see. They've got 31 wins. I don't have 7.
So close. 8. 8. So to break it down, what they are 1-12 against the Twins. They are 1-12 against the Royals. They're 1-8 against Detroit, but they're 500, 5-5 against Cleveland. Cleveland, the team that always seems to be their biggest nemesis, is actually the team that they've had the most success against.
Ugh. Like this team is just so atrocious. Like, um,
What's their, let's see. I'm looking at the baseball reference from today, and this wasn't updated with today's game yet. So, little outdated on the stats, but
I'm
their
gonna. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
their Pythagorean win is 37-93. So the Pythagorean win says they should still be 6 games better than they are. If that means anything to you.
All right. So with Paul DeYoung traded,
Mm-hmm.
Yoan Moncada is third on the White Sox in F4
He's
at 0.311.
he's he's played like 8 games all year.
And the
Oh,
last time he played was in April.
oh my God. So let me guess. Fetty 1 or Crochet 1, Fetty 2, Paul DeYoung 3.
Uh, I don't know. I'm just reading an article here where they just gave the stats. And Chris Flexen, with Eric Fetty gone, Chris Flexen is second on the team in pitching WAR. And the Sox have lost his last 19 starts. And during that span of his last 19 starts, he's 0-9 with a 5.75 ERA, and he's second in pitching WAR.
Yeah, here's his overall totals on the year. 5.34 ERA, 4.99 FIP, a 1.5 whip. Under Garrett Crochet, who has been phenomenal, a 3.64 ERA, a 2.83 FIP, a 1.1 whip, and a strikeouts per 9 of 12.6. Jonathan Cannon, young pitcher, he's been okay. Not missing a lot of bats, but a 4.26 ERA going into today. did he start today's game? I believe he did. So those numbers will be a little different, but either way, um, Michael Kopech, like going into today, hasn't allowed a run with the Dodgers. Oh no, scratch that. He's now given up one. He came into today. I don't know what he did on Sunday today, but he came into Sunday's game 11 and a third innings pitched, 11 appearances, and one run. And he has a strikeouts per nine of 11.9 and a base on ball per nine of 1.6. A guy who, with the White Sox, had a base on ball per nine of 4.9.
The White Sox do not have a single offensive, like a position player with a WAR over 1.
Yeesh.
Luis Robert is the closest. He's 0.8.
Yeah, not great production this year from
Is
La Pantera.
I believe I read one time or heard Theo Epstein say that to win a World Series, you need every position to have at least a 2 WAR player. And the White Sox do not have even a 1 WAR player at any of these positions.
Yeah, that's not surprising with this record.
It's just ungodly bad. Like how does it happen this way?
It defies what we think is possible in modern baseball. I never thought a team in this era with this amount of resources, training, with just the variance of baseball, having a team be this bad.
Andrew Benintendi, the highest paid player in your team history, is a minus 1.3 F4. Minus.
Boy, you mean that 620 OPS isn't getting him much value? Is that what you're saying?
It is not a good value.
266 OBP.
The franchise record for the White Sox in losses is 170. I'm sorry, 107 by the 1970 White Sox. There's a good possibility that we see that before Labor Day.
Yeah. The way this is going. Is Eloy Jimenez still killing it on the Orioles?
He is not. He's down to like a 700 OPS.
Oh yeah, I'm looking at that now. Hasn't hit a homer yet.
Yeah.
Jeez, Eloy Jimenez has 5 home runs all year.
Yeah.
So over his past 3 seasons total, 3 seasons, Eloy Jimenez has homered 39 times over his past 3 seasons. We were expecting him to do that like on a yearly basis.
It's everything. Everything has just not worked out the way they wanted to the like a ridiculously bad degree.
Right, because I mean, when you're rebuilding the way they were, you figured, okay, you hit on a group of these guys, you're gonna miss on a few. That's gonna happen, but sheesh. Like, I mean, Luis Robert was really good last year. He's battled injuries, but he's shown you flashes of being good. This year, I don't know. I feel like he's kind of checked out of the whole thing, but Yoan Moncada hasn't worked the way you'd hoped. Andrew Vaughn hasn't worked the way you hoped. Michael Kopech hasn't worked the way you hoped. Eloy Jimenez hasn't worked the way you hoped. I mean, you got pretty good from Tim Anderson for a while, and then all of a sudden he just fell off a cliff like crazy. And then you signed some free agents. Yasmani Grandal didn't quite work out the way you hoped. He was good his first year, but then after that, it was kind of disappointing. Obviously, Dallas Keuchel was a major flop. Lucas Giolito had his few really good years, so that worked for a bit, and then it stopped working. It goes on and on. It goes on and on and on and on. At least Dylan Cease eventually worked out, and then you traded him.
I, I just I'm at this point where I'm just sitting back and rooting for losses because every loss just makes Jerry look dumber and dumber in the public eye.
I mean, listen, what's the difference between 119 and 120 losses at this point? I personally know Sox fans who want to see them lose as many games as possible because of that. And I kind of don't blame them. It's like you might as well go all out. That's a sad thing to say, but they just, rightfully so, a lot of Sox fans just want to see Jerry just suffer the most from this.
I think the White Sox fans are at this point, it's one of those things that's just so bad and it's just funny that you can't get mad about it anymore. It's just you just have to laugh.
Like
It's they
again, it doesn't seem possible. It's unreal. It doesn't feel real, but it is.
if the White Sox go on a losing streak here, I mean, uh they like they've already been on losing streaks, but if they
I
go
was
on
gonna
another one,
say,
if they go on another one here, like a double digit one, then I think the whole of baseball fandom is going to go on, you know, on that worst record ever watch, have countdowns and
people were watching the 20-game losing streak when they were at 19. People around baseball followed and tuned in. Hey, Jerry, always bitching about how you don't get all the attention. Oh, we're, blah, blah, blah. Hey, you got attention, but this isn't the way you want that attention.
it's just I'm going to be genuinely curious of how much house cleaning there is going to be after this.
Well, I think they believe their infrastructure is good.
I mean, I think you're going to have all new uh, broadcasters.
So you think Schriffin's one and done?
I think Stoney's going to leave, and I think Schriffin's was so ungodly bad that you can't you can't have him back. I just
You really can't.
I think that's just bad. I think it's an opportunity with assuming Stoney leaves, and he may want to come back. Who knows? But if he decides to leave, then it's an opportunity for you to just put a brand new pair in and not saddle somebody. And John Schriffens has been bad.
Yes.
He's been a company man. I will give him that. He's been
Oh, how dare you say that? There's nothing wrong. There's something wrong in the clubhouse. How dare you say that, you radio losers? Like, dude. Shortly after that, he got fired. I think there was more than enough sufficient evidence that there were issues in that clubhouse. And you know what? Sure, you don't have to talk about that on air. Then don't say anything.
yeah. Yep. Steve Stone has been a master of being able to criticize, but also rein it in at times. He had the late with the Cubs, but other than that, it's been his career. He's been able to criticize, but rein it in.
Well, these guys haven't been playing as well as we hoped they were. You're right. I mean, Stoney has been one of the best in the business for 40 years now. He truly has.
And, he's this season has to just so tough on him.
I can only imagine because he must have been devastated when Benetti left.
Oh, I'm sure. I'm sure. Like having a good partner makes that job so much easier.
You know what else I've noticed too is I listen to some of the Detroit highlights, the Detroit broadcast highlights from this series against the White Sox. You can tell Benetti is a touch more enthusiastic when the Tigers were hitting and scoring and winning. Like you could just tell. At least
Yeah.
I could.
Like it's is noticeable when you have to have one radio partner, television partner carry the load. And you know, I listen to a majority of my Cubs games, and when Pat is out and there's somebody else filling in for Pat, it's such a noticeable difference of Ron having to carry everything. And you start seeing I love Ron Coomer, but you see the deficiencies he has when he's not paired with somebody that's good. Is um, not like he's awful, but you see where there's that balance that you need to have.
There's a massive difference between Pat Hughes and somebody else, and that's not necessarily a knock on others, but it's just a testament to how great Pat Hughes is.
There's a difference between a Hall of Famer and just another guy.
Right.
Like there's a noticeable difference. And and I think Pat and Ron are a fantastic pair.
They are.
I love the radio broadcast.
I do too.
And when you have Zach Zaidman in, or like I like Matt Spiegel, but when he's been in, it's a different animal.
It's different, but I will say I give credit to Speaks. I do think he gets better and better each time he does it.
I agree with you. And it's the passion is there.
Yes.
Like
Yes.
I don't like Zach Zaidman at all. But Spiegel has gotten better. And I would put any amount of money down that at home at night, that guy puts on a TV broadcast and puts it on mute and practices.
Yeah, I think so.
Because I think he would love to do that at some point.
I think so too. I absolutely think he would.
And who knows how much longer Pat has in him.
He's not going to admit it. I don't know how much longer he's going to be around. I mean, not saying alive, but
No, but doing that the broadcast.
I would not be surprised if that time comes within a season or two where he says, I'm only doing home games.
Yeah, I if it's 2 years, I would be shocked. I think he might be done after this season or after next season or taking a big step back of some sort. But I think Speaks is probably gearing himself up for, at least throwing his hat in the ring.
I just don't want Zaidman as the full-time radio guy after this.
No,
I'm fine with Zaidman as a pre-post game host. I think he's good at that. But at play-by-play, if you're going to keep Zaidman, just have him as pre-post game host. I'm fine with that.
yeah, he can't be the guy. He just can't.
No. He was pretty good with DePaul. You remember, didn't he call DePaul games?
I think he still calls DePaul games.
He still does. Oh, I haven't listened to DePaul games in ages, but I thought from what I heard of the DePaul games, I thought he did a pretty good job with those.
Yeah.
I don't want him to be the Cubs announcer.
It's a different like, mid-tier college basketball versus the Chicago Cubs.
Right.
The Chicago Cubs have
It's a different sport.
It's a different sport, and the Cubs have had a history of the best broadcasters.
Right.
I mean, I would put their history of broadcasters up against any team.
Yeah, it's a very good history. I mean, Chicago's been very blessed as a whole with great broadcasters. And so when you have one that isn't very good, it sticks out like a sore thumb. When you're replacing John Schriffen for Jason Benetti, or, when you've brought in guys when other guys have passed away, like Harry Carey or, Jack Brickhouse when he left. Obviously, you eventually got Harry Carey after Jack Brickhouse, but, it's always different when you exchange somebody you're used to for a long time. Hell, remember when Pat Foley left and, like you went to Voster's, who I think is a nice enough guy. I think he's got a bright future. I just don't think he was ready for the job, but now you've hired a real pro as the Blackhawks play-by-play guy. But what I'm trying to say is that stuff is incredibly noticeable. Um, we did have a few good transitions. I thought that Adam Amin taking over for Neil Funk was a very good transition because I think Adam Amin is very, very good at his job. So you do get lucky in times like that, but it's not always that easy.
Yeah, Adam Amin, he is, he's gone on to do a lot of good things. The guy
He's a
has,
national broadcaster now too.
yes. So that he's been a good Chicago product. Uh, but we look at the Cubs and Vince Lloyd and Harry Carey and Steve Stone. Um, you had Dan Roan in there as a substitute. uh, you had Ron Santo and Bob Brenly and Tom Brenneman and Pat Hughes, and like you've just had a laundry list of really good broadcasters.
Mm-hmm. For sure.
I mean, they had Ronald Reagan
Way back when.
in the 30s.
And that was when the broadcasts were like simulated. He would stand at the mic, somebody would get telegraphed the play in, and then he would say what it was.
With Jack Brickhouse and just if I remember correctly, I believe Rogers Hornsby was a Cubs broadcaster for a season or two,
Yeah, I think so.
probably 1950, 1951, somewhere around there, I'm guessing.
Hello, this is Cubs baseball on the air. We all talk like this. We all sounded like this back then.
Have uh there's a comedian, and God, I'm drawing a blank on his name. It's Shane Gillis. Have you ever heard of his stand-up comedy special on Netflix?
I've seen bits of his stuff, but not like a lot of it in depth. But I've heard a lot of. I know people that saw him live recently.
He's got one bit where he's just like, white people stop being cool when they stop talking like this, like, yeah, old Curly is up at the plate, and yeah. And he's like, and that all stopped when Jackie Robinson came into baseball. Uh, he's like, after that first at bat, they were like, oh yeah, so you've got to watch that bit. It's hilarious. He's like,
I'll have to check him out. I've heard he's pretty funny.
yeah, he's got a special on Netflix, and it's hilarious. Like,
Oh, look at Babe Ruth. Oh, look at that picture. Is such a Mary. He's not even pitching to him. It's like they all sounded like that back then.
uh, yeah, he was like, yeah, he's like, we got old Curly pitching against this colored fellow. He's like, old Curly. He runs the 40-yard dash in 6 seconds, making him the greatest athlete alive.
Old Curly.
Nobody can hit an old Curly speedball.
That's funny.
Yeah, but this Cubs team, I mean, they are who they are. I mean, they ran a couple games in a row where you're like, all right, the offense is coming alive, making this at least fun, and then they shit the bed again.
I mean, here's the thing. Like, if you look at the past week or so, outside of that Cleveland sweep, it's like you've been consistently winning 2 out of 3. And in most circumstances, that plays well. That plays very well. But you dug yourself such a hole where you honestly, if you had any shot, you needed to basically sweep all those series. That's how big of a hole you dug. That's
Yeah,
just the reality.
that's the point is I know the front office and your manager downplay all these games that you lose in April, but April doesn't win you the division, but it can lose you the division. And the Cubs dug themselves a hole that they
May and June killed them.
May and June were so brutal that the hole was so deep that without some sort of just absolute amazing run, they're cooked. And you're right. They've they haven't been swept. Even when they lose, most of the time they're not getting swept. They're taking 1 out of 3, but they're winning 2 out of 3 most of the time. You're like, that's if you could have even been 500 in May and June, like that,
Everything would be different. Everything.
you would be right there in the hunt. And as it stands now, you've got like 30 games left, and you're 5.5 games out of the wild card. And in order to do that, you'd have to leapfrog St. Louis, San Francisco, the Mets, and Atlanta.
Yep.
That's too many teams, too many games. And
today, a lot of those teams lost, but you lost. So it didn't matter.
Yeah, you lost, and you could have gained a game on every single one of those teams lost, or except for St. Louis. You could have been, moved up a game on everybody, and you just didn't. You don't take advantage. Like we've been talking for weeks now that the Cubs would need to go on like a 10-game win streak to jumpstart them. You go on a 10-game win streak, then yeah, those 2 out of 3s are more impactful. But without that catch up, you're just stuck.
Yeah. Yeah. It's just the reality of it. But you know what? Hopefully, at least we can salvage some things at the end of the year. You bring up maybe Owen Casey. You see how some of these guys finish the year off. That's what you try to salvage from this.
I mean, it's Hector Neris was DFA'd.
Yes, he was.
And a lot of people were shocked. And I was shocked that those people were shocked. Like he hasn't been good.
He hasn't been good. There was the vesting option or whatever. But you know what? He's probably going to go to Houston, and you'll see him in the postseason pitch some lights out 6th or 7th innings. And Hector Neris was not good for the Cubs. He threw way too many non-competitive pitches in big moments, but I still do somewhat maintain that he was misused. I don't think he was ever supposed to be a permanent closer. He was signed here to be a 7th, 8th inning guy, and he wasn't used as such. That doesn't excuse the bad pitching per se, but I truly do believe that.
And he's going back to the Astros, and watch him just pitch really well.
Oh yeah, I mean, I'm expecting it at this point. He was great for them last year. That's why he got his money with the Cubs this year.
Yeah, so it's just been a really frustrating season.
It has.
There was a guy in Merriweather that you were very confident in. He gets injured and just has not been the same guy.
No, he has not. He has not been the same guy. And today things kind of blew up in his face, and yeah.
And you're just, what can you do? What can you really do?
A lot of the bullpen has honestly pitched very good, but
if you could have figured out this bullpen, the current iteration of the bullpen, if you could have figured this out in April, this is a much different team that we're talking about.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is.
It's just they had too many question marks starting the season, and they couldn't figure out things on the fly. I just wonder what the catching future of the Cubs looks like.
Well, if you have faith in Moises Ballesteros, there's potential there. I also think that Miguel Amaya is at least showing that, hey, maybe there is a future for him, because he has been hitting very, very, very well. And his framing lately has been, I wouldn't call it elite or good, but it's been better. So he's shown you something here after making some adjustments.
Um, you know, I mean, I guess the fielding has been better. The catching ability as a catcher has been better for Amaya than earlier in the season but uh, I wonder if Bethencourt was a kick in the ass for him.
I mean, I think he realized he had to make some adjustments. He got rid of that leg kick, and they saw how quickly they moved on with Jan Gomes, so something
Yeah,
to think about.
and you know, Bethencourt can't hit, but he's been a good defensive catcher,
He can throw. That's what he could do well. He can throw to the bases.
and that was literally something that Amaya couldn't do earlier in the season. Like
No.
he was an automatic stolen base.
Yeah, he couldn't throw, and neither could Jan Gomes at the end there.
Oh yeah, Jan Gomes was good last year.
He was very good, but you know what?
Father
Um,
Father Time hit him so hard, gave him a Mike Tyson uppercut.
yeah, no kidding. You ain't wrong.
Uh, and so, you know, I'm curious if Amaya is going to use this opportunity and grow and next year be a valuable piece, or if he's just a backup catcher in this league.
Because he hit the grand slam the other day. He had a 2-run homer the other day. Like the overall offensive numbers have looked very, very good lately.
Yeah, lately, yeah, he's been, but as a whole, if you look at the whole season, it's been not so good. But lately, he's really picked it up.
Yeah.
And catching has been a black hole this season.
Well, if the catching produced like it did, like it has over the past few weeks, like it did in the first half of the season, things would be different.
Yeah, and last year the first base spot was a black hole, and you think you've solved that, or at least have a you know uh, a major league ready person there. It's it's now you've got to figure out some of these other positions and how you handle this as a whole. And the first key to that, I guess, is who are you calling up in September, and are you going to give them meaningful playing time?
Well, I think Owen Casey has the chance to show what he has. There's been rumors that he's going to get called up, so let's see. Hey, by the way, Cam Smith was just promoted to South Bend. He's hit like home runs in 5 or 6 straight days, and now he's being promoted.
That he has been on a tear.
Yeah, it's pretty unreal.
Um, so good for him. Um, I mean, he's still a couple years away from being ready to play for the Cubs, though.
Right, but you like to see the way he starts.
Yes, if he can continue playing this well, all season and the next season, yeah, that's a good thing.
For sure.
Um, is Matt Shaw going to get called up? Is Cade Horton going to get called up? Um,
Hey, Jordan Wicks is rehabbing, which is nice to see.
that's a good thing to see. Um, yeah. So I just wonder if these guys are going to get playing time.
Well, you dumped David Bodie,
Yeah,
so
and a lot of people are really upset by that.
I
Like,
well, I think what they're upset about is that they dumped him and not Patrick Wisdom. I think that's the issue.
um,
Which I think Patrick Wisdom. I don't think he's going to be here much longer either.
no, he's not. But here's the thing: is who can hit more home runs?
Patrick Wisdom has more power.
by significant levels. And that's just really what it is. Is is David Bodie. I I think he's a guy that we all liked. He was a try hard guy. And he showed early on some flashes of success. And I think we were all excited that a try hard guy was gonna do it. And he's just never he's a 4A baseball player.
He's had such a weird career of like ups and downs. You're like, oh, is this guy still a guy? He'll have his moments. He'll have his nice pinch hit doubles and to drive in runs when the game is late and you're up by several runs. He had a number of clutch hits, including that famous grand slam in 2018. But then there were times where, like, yeah, he kind of looks like a 4A player. So it's just been all over the place. At the end of the day, the time for him to be on an MLB roster with the Cubs just it ran out. And I know people are frustrated about Patrick Wisdom. I get it. But again, I think that time is coming to a close pretty soon as well.
Oh yeah, I would be shocked if he's on the Cubs next year.
Yeah, I don't think he will be.
So it's he gives you more opportunity to hit a home run, and they're gonna wash hands with him anyway. But you know what? David Bodie has earned like what $15 million playing professional baseball.
Yeah,
Um,
he's made a nice chunk of change.
and so the guy, uh, the guy has made a like retirement money. He could retire
Right.
and live off that money for the rest of his life.
Yeah, exactly. And he'll always have that spot in Cubs lore with that grand slam. He's responsible for hitting arguably the most epic walk-off home run in franchise history.
Fair enough. That guy can just sit around Chicago and do, you know, local TV spots and, appearances and things like that and autograph signing shows and he'll be fine. And I'm sure somebody will try to pick him up.
Yeah, next year. Because he cleared waivers. He was outrighted to AAA. He's no longer on the 40-man roster. So if you stay with Iowa, then next year he has the team options. And assuming the Cubs don't pick that up, they can just buy him out for like $1 million. So he could get that $1 million buyout.
Yeah. And he's he'll be 32 at the start of next season.
Hmm.
It's just this maybe somebody gives him the opportunity, but this just might be done. And you know what? Count this as a success. You got to play Major League Baseball
Yeah.
and make $15 million
Yeah.
plus. I'm not upset.
No,
It's
I'm not either.
it's getting rid of him was a winning move.
Yeah, the time comes when you have to make changes, and now's that time.
Yep.
There was one more Cubs note I wanted to talk about. Just real quick. Last week, we saw the Detroit Tigers come to town, and it was the first time we saw Javier Baez return to Wrigley Field since he was a Cub. And as you and I know, Javier Baez's career has taken an absolute turn for the worst. And he's owed $27 million next year, the year after, and the year after. And over the past two seasons, he has arguably been like one of, if not the worst position players in baseball. He is an absolute shell of his former all-star self. And I'm just glad that we were able to give him the warm welcome back that he deserved. And I don't mean to do this to keep putting him down, because I'll always love Javi Baez for what he did as a Chicago Cub. But the reality is, him getting showered with that much love might be the last time he sees that during his playing career. Because it's been brutal, and I don't see a switch flipping. I mean, when we saw him go 0 for 4 with 4 strikeouts in that opening game of that series, you just you just said, "Wow!" I mean, he doesn't even look close on any of this, and it's really sad to see. But I'm at least glad he was able to get the standing ovations, the Javi chants, and for him to show his appreciation to the fans and for the fans to appreciate him.
Have you looked at what his season slash line is?
I have. It's bad.
It's beyond bad. His slash line, for those of you that haven't looked, his batting average is 184. His on base percentage is 221. His slugging is 294 with an OPS of 516. Um, that's just bad. Let's see. His WRC plus. Would you like to guess what that is?
Like 48.
41.
Okay, I was close.
41.
That's really, I mean, that's not even playable in MLB level.
Do you know what his WRC plus was in 2018 for the Cubs?
I want to say 138.
131.
Okay.
Yeah, so it was a 90 difference. Like it's just terrible.
Yeah, that's bad.
And defensively, he's not been playing well either.
No, he's not.
Like
Nothing's going right.
I don't know what happened. This just the spark went out.
Well, I always had that feeling his play wasn't going to age particularly well, but I at least thought the defense would still be there, you know?
That's what I thought. I thought he would be a stellar defensive player, but that swing was not going to age well at all.
No, and the other thing too is it would be one thing if you were batting like 184, but if you were still like on a 20 home run pace, that provides value. He's got like what, 5 or 6 home runs?
Let me go back and look. Bobby has 6 home runs.
Yeah, not good.
Yeah.
You might not even hit triple or double digits.
Oh, there's no way he's hitting double digit home runs.
Like I said, if you were still getting 20 homers a year, you'd have the value in that, but you're not getting even close to that.
Yeah, it is. He is so cooked, and I don't know what it is that happened. You know, Chris Bryant, it was that shoulder injury, never fully recovered. You're like, okay, I see where this happened. Like,
Yeah, that looks really bleak too.
and you know, it doesn't make it easier or better when you can pinpoint where it happened, but it at least, like, you're like, okay, well, this explains it. It sucks and you don't like seeing it, but it at least explains it. But Javi, I don't know what happened. You know,
Yeah.
Sammy Sosa got hit in the helmet, wasn't the same guy.
And then
Like,
got old.
yeah, it just, I don't know what happened to Javi. I don't know what happened. And, you know, you saw the player when he first came up and you're like, woof, this guy strikes out like 50% of the time. Can't happen. And then he found, I don't know if it's the guy needs the lights to be bright to make the magic happen. And like, just they haven't been bright anywhere else. I don't know. Like, because when he went to the Mets, you're like, okay, well, that's a big market team, but they weren't playing well when he was there. And then Detroit is just not the same. The team is not good, and the the spotlight's not very bright. Like, I just don't know. I can't explain it.
Hey, he played best under Joe Madden.
It's true.
Take that as you will.
True. But regardless, it was nice to see him get, like, because he wasn't a bad guy.
No, not at all.
Like,
He was a very likable guy, very easy to cheer for.
and this is one person's story. This is very anecdotal, but I would say if I looked at counted Cubs jerseys that I encounter in my life, I see more Javi Baez jerseys than anybody else.
I don't know. I think I've seen more Rizzo's, but he's definitely up there.
And it depends on where you go. Like I spent a lot of time like in Berwyn, Cicero. There's a lot of Hispanic people, and the Javi Baez numbers there are just unreal.
He was a hero to many people.
Yeah, I do see a lot of Rizzo, but I would say this is anecdotal from my experience. I see more Javi Baez than anybody else, and at the stadium, it's definitely more Rizzo's, but out and about, it's way more Javi Baez.
Fair enough.
And it speaks to people here still love him, and there's going to be like, I guarantee you, amongst casual fans or fans that don't watch the game, but like going to the game and buying jerseys and know players' names, amongst those players, if you said Javi Baez was coming back, they would be excited.
Mm-hmm.
Anybody that watches the games would be like, no.
Like, yeah.
But yeah, I'm glad that he got a good reaction. He deserved it. There was no reason to boo him.
No, there was no way he was getting booed by the Cub fans. No way.
Rizzo, Bryant, and Baez all leaving was the end of an era, but none of those guys did anything to make Cubs fans want to boo them.
No, goodness no. I don't think really any former Cub from that era has.
No.
Maybe a little bit with Wilson Contreras, but that's about it.
Yeah. Maybe Wilson Contreras.
He did get some boos when he came back with the Cardinals, kind of after he trashed the Cubs and talked about how great the Cardinals are, but that's about it.
And I know there's people that will boo Sammy Sosa, and
that's different. That's complicated.
That's a very complicated thing.
Right.
But of the era, like, there's no hate for Rizzo or Bryant or Baez.
Goodness no, far from it.
And there are talent like the Phillies. The Phillies fans would have booed the shit out of them. As former Phillies, they would have just booed the shit out of them.
Like Santa.
Yeah, pelted him with batteries.
Well, once Rizzo comes back next week, that's going to kind of do it for all the welcomes back.
Got to have a little welcome back party.
Yep.
Well, is there anything else that you wanted to talk about?
Nope, I've said my piece.
Well, I think that's going to do it for this episode of Bill Swerski Sports Talk Chicago. I want to thank everybody so much for listening. Please hit subscribe however you listen to podcasts with us: iTunes, Stitcher, YouTube, Google Play, Spotify, etc. Share this podcast with your friends. That's how we grow the show. Follow us on social media at Swerski Sports, Facebook.com/Swerski Sports, SwerskiSports.com, or ShyFanPat2 for Alex on Twitter /X, or AlexanderJPatCreative.com for all the cool stuff that Alex does. And again, thank you guys so much for listening. And until next time, bear down.
Cubs win! What a lucky break! The good Lord wants the Cubs to win!
We thank Ditka and God for all they have provided.
Cubs win! Cubs win! Cubs win!
Oh, I don't want her. You can have her. She's a Packer fan. She can't fit in my van.
And she looks like number New Yorkers. Smoking crack is not legal on planes. Bears 31 to -7. The Bears. Oh, when the Bears go bearing down.